Hello and welcome to the This Works For Me Virtual Summit. I'm your host, Faith Watson. I am the director of the Faculty Development Center at Murray State University. Some people believe that creating multimedia is difficult and it requires a large production facility with specialized knowledge. However, our guest today, Dr. Stephen Crawford, believes otherwise. And he will be sharing with you some strategies that you could use to create multimedia for your courses. Dr. Crawford, thank you very much for taking the time to share with us today.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Yes, I know you have a wealth of knowledge, so I'm really excited to get into this conversation with you. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, where you're from, and what you do?
So I'm Dr. Stephen Crawford, and I am the District Director for the Maricopa Center for Learning and Innovation, which is part of the district office for the Maricopa Community Colleges, one of the largest community college districts in the country. I began my career working as an instructional designer and a technologist. Actually, really began in IT on a university on the East Coast at Old Dominion University. And I got involved in distance learning in the late 90s as we were doing distance learning classes via satellite television with two-way audio. And so the idea of video being part of an online distance learning course has always been natural to me. And I've seen a lot of changes in evolution over those years.
Great. And so I'm really looking forward to looking at this strategy with you. In fact, the title of your strategy is Creating Multimedia for Your Course. What is multimedia?
Well, you know, when you think about multimedia, we think about a number of different things. We always go to video first because we think of television. We think of, you know, again, we think about some of the I was going to say traditional distance learning techniques from 20 years ago, where it was very, very video based when we thought about telecourses over television. But as that moved to the internet, we had to go back to text again, and we kept trying to move back to video. In reality, I would say that I would classify multimedia for education in 4 categories. One of them is audio presentations. I think we forget the simple technique of audio presentations when it's really very convenient. And with the recent reemergence of podcasts, I think we're rediscovering the beauty of audio, and our students and other faculty are listening to audio wherever they go. Like this morning, as I was driving into the office, I was listening to podcasts. So that was an opportunity for me to kind of educate myself on a topic as I was driving into work. And with audio, that is a great opportunity to do a lot of different things. So for an example, when I travel to a conference, I can simply just grab my iPhone and meet with an expert and have an interview and record an audio interview right then and there as we're at the conference. Then I would say the next type of multimedia is voice over PowerPoints. And this is where you're kind of taking that audio again, but now you're supplementing it with graphics and you're voicing over images. And so, you know, there's a lot of tools that we've used over the years to take that slide deck, that PowerPoint deck, or whatever tool we use, and just speak over the slide. A lot of faculty are comfortable with this because it reminds them of what they do in the classroom, because they're used to talking with a PowerPoint behind them. So they find that very comforting. And so it's a very easy way to move into adding multimedia to your class. Even if if you're doing an online course, it's a great way to bring in your lecture presentations. If you're doing a hybrid course or even a flipped course in a fully face-to-face, you can record your lectures for students to rewatch outside the classroom, and that's a great technique to think about. Mm-hmm. The next one, to kind of bring it up another notch, would be screencasting presentations. Mm-hmm. In this case, more often than not, you're demonstrating something on the screen because you're now creating a video. And so you may be walking a student through a demo on how to use a software, and one of my favorite examples is how to use one of the databases that your library has to do a research search for a particular question. But another one that I don't think we use enough of is actually use it to provide feedback to students. You could have their paper that they've submitted to you electronically on the screen, and you can walk through and show them different parts of the paper and make voiceover comments as you're walking them through, and even make changes and show them how it changes things. So that's a really neat way to think about how to provide some feedback to students. And then there's, go ahead.
Go ahead, you go ahead.
And then the fourth and last category I would say is video. And that's the one where, again, we all want to navigate to that because it seems like that's the cool, quick, fast one to do. And it can be, but it can also be the harder one to do. And the one that can be hard, you know, you have to, it's a little bit more nuanced. So, you know, that one I think we'll talk about more here in a minute.
Okay, great. So what factors should one consider, you know, when choosing between certain media, like between screencasts versus voice over PowerPoint? What are some factors that we should be considering?
You know, I think the number one factor is, what are you trying to say? What is the message? If you are interviewing someone, we'll go to that model. There's two good examples. One of them is this one right here, video. You can see me, I can see you, the students can see both of us. And so our audience can see us interact, and that can be quite telling. At the same time, audio could be a just as adequate way to do things, especially if you don't have the camera and the lights and everything to make it look pretty. But the audio can be just as effective. So you think about what are you trying to say and how are you trying to reach your students. Another good example is like if you're doing a demonstration. If you're trying to demonstrate, and an example I was using with a faculty member last week was working in community colleges. I was talking to a faculty member in our automotive program. And it was like, would you use an audio description to explain how to remove a part from a car, clean it, and put it back on? Or would you use a voiceover slides where you've taken still pictures? And that could be the right way to do it if you want to highlight and draw on those images and then speak to those. That could be a very effective way to do things. Or you could have a video of you actually doing the task. Now, the problem with the video of you actually doing the task is the students don't want to see your face. They actually want to see you do the task. And so I think that's one of the things, and it's one of the reasons why we tend to gravitate towards video, because it does create that connection. That seeing another human face is important, but once you get into the content of your presentation, it becomes much less important. So a lot of times, we'll start by showing the speaker, and it's like, introduce themselves, and they introduce the topic. And then from that point on, you may not see their face again until the very end of the video. So you actually see their hands manipulating what they're doing as opposed to their face. Because at that point, the students just want to see what's being done. Right. And so those are things to take into consideration. So if you're doing a lab experiment and you're showing the students how to go through a science lab, they want to see your hands manipulating the device. They don't want to see, a wide angle and no detail. But sometimes the easiest way and the most efficient way to get it done might just be take some still pictures. You can draw and annotate them and then drop them into software and speak on top of them. That can be just as effective. So you really want to consider what you're saying and then consider what is the most easiest, effective way to say it.
Yeah, really look at the objective that you're trying to help your students.
Yeah. And then, and that's an important piece. I'm talking about that objective part. I think that kind of gets into a question of how long should a video be? And my answer is like, it should last as long as it needs to. When you look at the research, you will see that 6 minutes tends to be this magic mark that students start coming off of videos and they stop watching them. But that's not entirely true. We do see students go through and watch hour-long videos. If you take into account some of the most popular podcasts that Apple iTunes lists, the Joe Rogan Show, that can go 3 hours. And there's a video version of that. And I know people who watch all 3 hours of every episode regularly. So the question then becomes, how do we hold people's attention for that long? That's the problem with video. We have gotten brainwashed that it has to be edutainment. It has to look like Mythbusters, We have to, if it's not quality, that we can't put it on cable and sell it for millions of dollars, like the Discovery Channel does, then is it really good video? And the answer is, that's the wrong standard. That's the wrong standard. The right standard should be what is the message? And so one of the things I think that turns faculty off from doing video is, what do you do if you have to fix the video later? When I was working in a nursing program, drugs changed, different things changed. And so one recommendation one year could be completely wrong the next. And so you would have to redo the entire 50-minute video. Why was the video 50 minutes? Because we're used to the 50-minute class. That's the wrong answer. In reality, your video should be chunked into different pieces. So when we think about instructional theory, it tells us that by focusing on one topic and one topic only, we can be very efficient. So if you can cover that one topic in 5 minutes, that's how long your video should be. And to give you an example of how that might work, again, using a nursing example, I had a faculty member who was saying, I have this one type of disease that I'm doing a voiceover slide presentation for, and it's 40 minutes long. I know it's too long, but I don't know how to make it any shorter. I said, well, are there any subcategories? She goes, yeah, there's 3 subcategories. And I just got my answer. Break it into 3 more pieces, because each subcategory could be its own piece. And it's like, that's the answer. So, and what makes that nice is it's easy to edit down the road. It's easy to fix. And it's easy to do. And more importantly for your students, they can focus on one thing, learn it well, and then move on to the next. And if they realize they need remediation and they have to go back and look at something, they can look at that one chunk and get to it very quickly. And so while the research tells us 6 minutes is kind of a magic mark, we don't want to go too long, but we don't want to cut ourselves short and cut important things out. So we got to make sure that we have a good balance there.
Yeah. So the focus then, if I understand you correctly, is really focusing on the objective and how you could literally hold your attention in the video. Because even if you have justification for a longer video than 6 minutes, you then also have to think about, how am I engaging the audience as they watch?
Yeah, you're going to think about the engagement part, and you also have to think about future-proofing it. What do I have to do if this changes and I need to update this? Updating one thing in the middle of a 1-hour video can be a pain in the neck, but updating one thing in the middle of a 5-minute video, that's easy. Just re-record the 5-minute video. It's easy to do. And the students, and I know some faculty who have what they call their video clothes. So they wear the same outfit whenever they record a video, regardless of what year it is. And they try to, and I think that's a little over the top. I mean, because like you look at people like me with a beard, the beard changes lengths, and so hair changes lengths. So there's always little telltale giveaways that this was done earlier or later. Students don't care. They just want to make sure that that they're getting the information in an easy to use way.
So what got you involved or interested in using multimedia?
So when I mentioned I worked at Old Dominion, working with those individuals, they were brilliant people, and I really enjoyed working with them, but they all had a broadcast television background. And so that was how a lot of our video has evolved for educational purposes, is from a broadcast mindset. When I was in charge of a multimedia team at Arizona State University's College of Nursing, I had people who originally were from a broadcast background, and they kept wanting to bring these broadcast values into videos and overcomplicate them. They were like, oh, it has to be edutainment, and you have to have music in the background, and you have to have all these things. And I'm going, no, those are all distractors. The educational research tells us that everything you're suggesting actually distracts us from the viewer. It's like, no, that you have to see the person. No, and so we had this conflict between what we knew from the research and what broadcasters practiced. And that's where I say YouTube was a good thing. YouTube broke all of the broadcast video rules and showed us that they worked. And so that made things as I had some staff changes and had individuals who were more of the YouTube mindset, we were able to bring these practices in because they were beginning to do them themselves anyway. And so that really was a very important, I think, turning point for a lot of what we're seeing in a lot of our programs. And it's one of the reasons why, you know, a lot of our institutions across the country have built these huge, beautiful studios. I've been part of them and they're great and I love them. But again, when this is a 4K camera, which means I can shoot a video on it that is Netflix quality and how the data is stored. And we do know that people have shot full-length motion pictures using iPhones. Why can't the masses do the same thing? And that's what you're seeing, again, on platforms like YouTube. The kids are doing it, for lack of a better term. We can do the same, and we can do a very good job. Now, some things in the broadcast world we have learned is that you have to be prepared. You got to know what you're going to do. Having a list of interview questions ahead of time and discussing them with the person you're interviewing makes it go much easier, especially on video, because you don't want to edit. If you can keep the editing to a minimum, it becomes quick and easy. And that's one of the things when you think about. So, for example, I did a case study video that was 20 minutes long, and we had, again, a broadcast mindset. So we had 3 cameras running. We did rehearsals, scripting, lighting. It was tons of equipment, tons of stuff. It also yielded over 24 hours of usable video for a 20-minute video. That meant somebody had to watch 24 hours worth of video, decide which camera angle they wanted to use when. And that's the broadcast mindset. When you look at the DIY mindset that we have today, again, taking your iPhone, taking a GoPro camera, taking the camera off of your drone if you own a drone, all these cameras have such high quality video. You can go and do so many different things, and it's now relatively simple. And the editing part is simple. If you want to get fancy, you can do a lot of this on an iPad. Apple's iMovie is so simple now that it even will do green screen. So I can put a green screen behind me and swap out the background and do that all on an iPad. I don't need a fancy computer. I don't need fancy software like we did even 5 years ago. It's gotten to be the point where anybody can do it. So if our faculty can do this, then that sets up in a position where we can now start asking our students to do this as well for their assignments.
I think what you're sharing is an encouragement to a lot of our viewers who were thinking otherwise, like they really needed a good production facility, specialized knowledge, and certain, high-tech, expensive equipment. But I think what you're sharing is comforting to say, you can do this.
Oh, yeah. I mean, and what's really interesting is I had a doctoral student at ASU. Her research was on comparing a course introductory video for an online course. And she had one video was shot in a studio with all the fancy lighting, all the fancy editing, green screen, pop out the background to something else. And then they had the exact same script that she did on her, actually on her computer camera, like we're doing here. And she just looked into the camera and spoke the same script to the students. And the students had a higher preference for the DIY version because it humanized her. Just like you, her office bookshelves were in the background with all her books on it. And the students reported she felt like a person who was speaking to me as opposed to someone in the studio who may not have cared as much. So it's actually a human connection. So we're seeing that you have to be very mindful of what we do in the studios and making sure that we're using those facilities properly and not for everything. So yeah, I tell folks that all you really need is good quality audio. That's the most important part. The students want to hear you clearly, and if they can't hear you clearly, it's not going to work well. So so get the audio right first, and if you're going to spend money, do 2 things. One, get a tripod to hold your camera, and that way it's steady, and that way you can step back from it. And the other one is get a good quality microphone. And in my case, I own 2. I have a lavalier microphone that clips to my shirt collar. So when I speak to it, the microphone is right there under my chin. So I'm getting good quality audio. So if a car drives behind me or something, odds are you're not going to hear it. The other one I have is what's called a shotgun microphone that sits on top of my, my camera, and that is a directional microphone. So if a car goes behind my camera, you won't hear it, but because the microphone is aimed directly at me. And that's really great for if I'm doing something in the field and it's myself and one other person, because then that microphone is picking us both up.
Wow, wow. I like some of the software that you're sharing. So what would you say to our viewers that resonate with what you have shared today, but they're a little bit hesitant in terms of really starting to use multimedia in their course?
I would say that do an introductory video to your course, even if it's face-to-face. And remember from this point of view, it doesn't have to be perfect. I've looked off camera a couple of times. You've looked off camera. We've looked at our notes. We've scratched our you know, we've scratched our face a couple of times. These are normal human things. We're going to trip over our words. In a classroom, do you get a mulligan? Do you get a chance to do a do-over? And the answer is no. If you trip over a word in a classroom, either you ignore it and move on, or you all laugh at it because it was pretty funny, and then you move on. That's just how it works. So don't be afraid of what we often call the one-take wonders. They work really well. And what I tell folks is, you know, if you've got that camera on the tripod, hit record, stand in front of it, count to 5 in your head, smile the entire time, start talking, do the thing, and when you're done, count to 5 and you keep smiling, keep that count to 5 in your head again, and then hit stop. That way, here's the editing process. You trim off the beginning and the end, and you don't have to worry about trimming off too close to where you started because you had a funny look on your face. And the same thing, it usually happens at the end where you finish, and the first word is like, oh my goodness, so I'm so glad that's over. And then you realize when you go to edit, because you recorded that part too, there's like no time between you smiling and you dropping down and doing that. And that's so hard to edit. So, you know, and I'd say just introduce yourself to your course, because often most of our institutions, I'm assuming yours is the same way, your LMS, your learning management system, opens the course shell up to your students before class starts. This way, the students can get to know who you are and understand what the course is about before they walk into the course. Because sometimes they're lucky enough to have the syllabus. Often all they have is the list of books you want them to buy. But if they can at least have the syllabus, that, and an introduction to who you are and what the course is about, and they get it through video, that creates a human touch. And that's regardless of modality, face-to-face, hybrid, blended, or online. Now, if you're doing it online, it's really important that you do that. But even if you're not doing online, I think it's an important thing to do. And it's an easy thing to do. Once you do that, you can then explore using tools like iMovie to just drop graphics down on either your Mac computer or your iPad or even your iPhone, because you can do that on all of those 3 devices. Drop images, talk over them, and then just decide how long it's going to work. If you're a Windows user or a Mac user, one of my favorite software tools is Camtasia, because from TechSmith. It is one of the easiest tools to use. You don't need to use Adobe Premiere, because Adobe Premiere is like using a sledgehammer to tap in a nail. And it's a very powerful, complicated tool. Keep it easy. And so Camtasia and iMovie are my 2 go-tos. Camtasia is great because you can capture the desktop easily if you want to do a screencast, and just have a good microphone. And often the microphone on your computer works just well. But if you're going to be in the field, think about your earbuds. I took, in the early days, I would actually clip my earbud microphone for my phone underneath on my shirt, underneath my chin, because that was where the microphone was. Until I bought I actually bought a more expensive microphone later. And then you start thinking about other things like lighting, and if you really want to get fancy, one of the things I like to do is go in the field, and I love holding my camera up and getting video. But problem with holding video with this is that I can hold this for a certain amount of time, but it's not perfectly still. For I think it's now $119. A new device just came out from DJI. It's the Osmo Mobile 3. I have the original version of it, and I love it. The new version is cheaper and super great. And what happens is if your hand literally is bouncing around this much, the gyros and the gimbal will actually hold the camera steady the entire time. The camera won't move. And so if you want to get some of that smooth, fancy video, and you want to move around, and this is great if you're going to be doing something in the humanities where you're actually in public interacting, or even the political sciences, and you want to capture an event as it happens and kind of commentate on it, that's a great way to do it.
Wow. These are some excellent resources that you are sharing with us. So could you, I know that you have been gracious enough that you're going to be sharing some resources with our viewers. Could you tell us a little bit of those resources that you're going to be sharing?
So yeah, I'll share some links to the software I've referenced, and some of these, what's nice is you may talk to your institution and find out there's institutional pricing that makes it even more affordable. But I'll share some of the hardware I use, the microphone types that I tend to like to use. The type of tripods that can hold your Android or your iPhone, not to be completely Apple centric. But I would also share, when you go to YouTube, captioning, and we haven't talked about captioning a little bit. I want to mention that a little bit. One of the things we're finding more and more is that the people who use the captions more often than anybody else are not people who are hard of hearing or deaf. It is average people like you and me. So for an example, I had gone on a trip a couple of weeks ago, and I got on the plane and I turned on captions on my Netflix immediately, because even though I had my headphones on, I can't always hear what's happening. So having those words cross the screen is, and it's very common. You'll see a lot of people do that on a plane. Another thing you'll see is people who are watching the videos in the office during their lunch period. They'll have the volume turned down, but they'll read the captions. And the other thing that you'll hear is people with kids. Babies in the other room asleep. They don't want to turn the volume up. They'll turn on the captions though. So think about captions, and then also about if you have students who English is a second language, you need to make sure they're accurate, because those key terms might be the easiest way for those students to actually identify what you're saying, and understand the difference between one thing or another. So make sure they're accurate. And so I'll provide a link to, like, YouTube does a great job with their live captions. Yeah. It's about 80% is the problem. So I'll provide a link on how you can fix them yourself. And that's one of the reasons why I script a lot of my videos ahead of time and plan them out.
Wow, excellent. I am very grateful for those resources that you will be sharing. And viewers, I'm going to be sharing them in the video description below, so look for that link. Dr. Crawford, thank you so much for sharing with us. And I wonder if you have a last challenge or an encouragement for our viewers today.
I go back, if your semester hasn't started yet, create an introductory video right now on your phone. Set it up, if you have something to hold it, if you have to hold it out, keep it short, plan it out ahead of time, keep it short, get to the point, record it, cut the ends off, and put it in your course. Or if it's on your desktop camera, whatever works easiest, go do it. You'll see what kind of connection you make to your students on that. And if your semester's already started, then do it to introduce the content for the week and do a weekly introduction. It's a great way to connect to your students.
Thank you very much. And viewers, in case you're wondering about even this virtual summit that I do, that's basically what I did, what Dr. Crawford just asked you to do. I do these videos and I just basically cut the front and the back. I rarely do any editing in between unless something really weird happens. And so you can do it too, very simple. I'm in my office and I'm actually just using a Logitech webcam right here on my computer. So I'm not even using any fancy technology or anything. Just using 3 lights, stand-up lights. So very simple. And I joined Dr. Crawford in letting you know that you can do this. So Dr. Crawford, thank you very much for taking the time to share with us today.
Thank you. You're welcome.
And to our viewers, I'd encourage you to share this episode with others, and we look forward to seeing you in the next episode of this virtual summit. See you soon.